Okay, folks, welcome to Chapter 13, Economics and Politics. We are going to start on page 370. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to put what we're going to cover in this chapter into a little bit of context, okay? So I want to head right on over to the dry erase board, and I want to talk about a few things. So let's put the economy in the context of the other social institutions. Okay, so I know you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the social institutions on the board. So let's write family, and let's write religion, the education, the economy, government, and then health and media, all right? And we have groups right here and individuals right here. Now, what we've been talking about, beginning of the semester up till around spring break is how you could think about society like this, right? And of course, with the impact of the coronavirus, things have changed a little bit. And so this is a little bit more disrupted now, as you know. And perhaps a significant reason why we are feeling so much disruption and angst and uncertainty about the future, maybe fear, because a lot of this disruption has to do with the economy. Okay? Now, I want to put this in context. So, beginning of the semester, we talked about the introduction to sociology in chapter 1 and the importance of research. Then we got into culture. And then we got into socialization, social interaction, and groups. We talked a lot about significant others. We talked about the importance of family for the socialization process for young people, and how family is a very important part of people's lives, right? Now, let me put this in context. I keep saying that, don't I? So, even we had a test question about this, but family is the most important agent of socialization for humans. Much of who we are is based upon how we are raised, right? And a lot of that is done in the family context. Now, the socialization process takes place over time, and other things are important as well, but certainly for young people, family and what you learn in the family, the interaction, that engaging with family members, even that process of interaction is critical. That is what makes us human, right? So family is the most important agent of socialization, but perhaps the economy, especially in the 21st century in 2020, perhaps the economy is the most important social institution for the functioning of society. That's where we are as humans in our world, especially in places like the United States. What we do day in and day out is largely tied to what we do in terms of work. And you may say, well, Mr. Gesser, I'm a college student, and what has that got to do with work? Well, so much of our behavior on a day-to-day basis is tied directly or indirectly to this notion of work. You're a student because you're probably going to school to get an education, to get a better job, to make enough money to feed yourself and family, to have a lifestyle of sorts. Economic activity is a fundamental part of the human experience in 2020. Let me repeat that. Maybe this is the first question I'm going to have you write in your lecture notes, and I want you to elaborate on this question. What is meant by economic activity being an important part of the human experience in 2020? Now, you're going to have to write that down. You might have to go back and listen to this and rewrite that. I want you to write that question down, and I want you to expand upon that based upon what we're going to talk about in this lecture and whatever else you want to add to that question. A couple of paragraphs. What is meant by economic activity is an important part of the human experience in the year 2020. How much does economic activity provide social pressure on us, even in our culture? The push to work. You can see this in yourself and probably people that you are around right now. A lot of the angst has to do with not working. And is my job going to be there when all this is said and done? Is our society going to be the same because of the economic disruptions that we've experienced in our country? So the economy might be the most important social institution for the functioning of society. Not just because economic activity is an important part of the human experience, but our society is built upon the foundation of an economy, a functioning economy. Okay? All right. So, having said that, what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do in this chapter, beyond what we just did, we're going to look at where the economy that we know now, basically now in this day and age, where did that come from? We haven't always had a social institution of the economy. Now keep in mind, when we talk about social institutions and we talk about the organization of society, these are modern considerations, largely since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, we haven't always had the economy. We haven't always had government. Okay, we haven't always had formal education, and this is going to take us back to looking at early human groups, hunters and gatherers. So we're going to start back there, and I'm going to move to the laptop presentation, and let's just get into it, right? So this probably looks a little familiar to you. We've looked at this in a couple of different capacities over the course of the semester. We first started looking at this in the chapter on culture, okay? And so what we're talking about, just as a reminder, sociocultural evolution. So during hunting and gathering societies, right? During hunting and gathering societies, where did people get their food from? Did they go to Kroger? Did they go to Walmart? Of course not, right? They hunted and gathered. They didn't go buy it off the shelf. But that really did characterize early human behavior, early human existence, survival. And maybe sometimes we feel like we're in that mode right now, but we actually do have to go to Kroger. Who are the essential employees right now? Healthcare providers, people working at the grocery store, people working in restaurants. Those are the only things that are really open right now, right? Because we have to have food. And we don't grow food. We don't hunt, and we don't gather. Now, we hunt for leisure and for fun, but it's not, how we survive and how we live on a day-to-day basis. This is why it's been so critical to make sure that people that deal with food can stay open and can go to work so the rest of the population has access to food, right? So where does the economy come from in this consideration, right? So we've talked about this again, a couple points this semester. The domestication of plants and animals. And as you look at these different modes of sociocultural evolution, ask yourself, why have humans done this? What was the purpose of domesticating plants and animals? To make life easier and to make food more accessible. And we caught on to that, and it became a central part of the human experience. Growing food, raising animals. And that led to something we call agriculture. Okay, now we're going to come back to this. I'm going to point something out as to how we think about the economy in terms of economic activity now. But the first stage of the economies essentially is established once we get to the agricultural revolution. We didn't have an economy as we know it today prior to the agricultural revolution, okay? What's critical about the agricultural revolution is that now we're growing enough food for ourselves and we have leftover, we have surplus. Having that surplus becomes critical for the start of an early economy, because what do you do with what you have left over, the extra stuff that you have? Okay? Let's speak about this a little bit as it relates to, and we're going to go through these different modes, all right, as we walk through the development of the economy. But let's talk about the early economy by focusing on this notion of exchange. And we're going to talk about the economy as a transformation of the medium of exchange. So, for example, what do we mean by medium of exchange? We're talking about dollars and money. Money is a medium of exchange. So I'm exchanging money to get something in return, right? I'm giving you $5 for a Whopper meal from Burger King or whatever, right? But money is what is that point of value of exchange. Think about the economy. I think you'll see this a little bit as we start into the transformation of the economy, but think about the economy as an extension of human interaction, an extension of human interaction. It doesn't always involve human-to-human interaction in the 21st century, but think about it early on as an extension of human interaction. And so let's look at this, right? So in hunting and gathering societies, the lack of surplus meant there was little exchange. We're not going to trade a whole lot because we don't have any to trade. And we talk about the show Naked and Afraid, right? They're not ever exchanging with other people because they're too busy trying to get enough for themselves on a day-to-day basis. And as a matter of fact, they usually don't have enough, right? So, that characterizes the hunting and gathering groups. You wake up and your sole focus is getting food and surviving. And that's really been the human experience for most of human history, right? So whatever trading that does occur in hunting and gathering societies is done in the form of barter, meaning I've got this and I'll give it to you and you give me something in return. That's the exchange, right? And that's what we're talking about. We don't start exchanging unless, I really need something you have and you really need something that I have, and we engage in an exchange. Okay? That's what barter is. Now, fast forward some, 250,000, 275,000 years, and we get to agricultural societies. Bartering still occurs, but people increasingly come to use money, a medium of exchange that places value on most items. So we use deposit receipts. And so in agricultural societies, this really is the dawn of civilization as we know it now. So now people are growing food and they're raising animals and they're growing enough food to feed themselves and their family, and they have extra. And what do they do with the extra? Well, something else that we also understand, the human population understands, is why are we all going to grow the same product? Why doesn't the person that lives over there grow this and the person that lives over there grow that and I'll grow this? We all do something different. We call this specialization of labor. So you do that and you grow something different and I'll grow something different. And what would we do with the leftovers? We exchange. Okay? And, fast forward now to 2020, you think about what people do in society. I'm a teacher. That's what I offer to this society, right? You may be, working in, retail. A lot of people, younger people work in retail. That's what you offer in exchange for money to buy different things and to do different things. Of course, we have a very complex economy now. But again, you could think about people. And going back to that question about economic activity being an important part of the human experience, what is going to be your specialization of labor in society? right? Because work is a critical part of existing in the 21st century. Okay? So going back here, looking at agricultural societies, you see various mechanisms of the medium of exchange, and then we get to industrial societies, okay? Something I want to point out about money, deposit receipts, paper money. You know, money is based upon, early money was based upon something of value. And so a deposit receipt would mean I'd give you this receipt for something you would give me from your hut, and you would bring that receipt to my hut, and I would give you the value of that receipt, right? You know, what is money based on? That's just the fundamental question. What is money based on? Well, it used to be based upon how much grain you had or how much food you had or whatever, you know, product of value that you have amongst the civilization in the community, right? And then we get into industrial societies, and this is not too far removed. You know, money used to be based upon gold, the gold standard. And money's not based on gold anymore. So, you know, for example, you think about what a debit card is based on. When you swipe a debit card, that's based upon how much money you have in the bank. But when you swipe a credit card in 2020, what's that based on? It's not money in the bank. It's based upon credit. It's based upon some assumptions made that you will pay this over some period of time. So that is not money that is present. That's money in the future. And so we get into some economic theory then about how modern societies function. Okay, so we're not going to get there just yet. Let's point this out. This is extremely important, okay? So we don't live on the gold standard anymore, okay? But even without a gold standard that restrains the issuing of currency to stored value, governments have a practical limit on the amount of paper money that they can issue. What happens if the government just starts printing out a bunch of money? And this is maybe a concern that people are starting to illustrate now, but you know, if there's so much money in circulation, money's easy to access, then the value of money is not significant. So if I have easy access to money, then a loaf of bread may end up costing $30,000, right? So here's a question for you. This is not something you have to write up in your notes, okay? Just something for you to think about. How do you get money? How do you get money? Right now, people are not working, so, you know, my daughter has a job. She's been furloughed. She's been laid off, basically. Doesn't have a paycheck coming in. So where does she get money from? Parents? Right? And so there are, I think, last I heard, there was over 16 million unemployment claims in our country as a result of the coronavirus. And that's a low estimate. That's people that have filed for unemployment. That's the largest number of people that have filed for unemployment since the Great Depression. So how does society sustain those people that need things like food? They don't have a job where they can make money to pay for food, to pay for a heating bill, to pay for cell phone, to pay for car insurance, to pay their home loan. And this is where you can have significant economic decline because so many people at one point are disconnected from the economy. Now remember, in the 21st century, the economy is quite important for the functioning of society, okay? Now let's go back. I'm sorry to veer off path here a little bit. But governments have a practical limit on the amount of paper money that they can issue. In general, prices increase if a government issues currency at a rate higher than the growth of its gross domestic product. You might have heard of that term before, GDP. Gross domestic product are the total goods and services that a country produces. Okay? So now money is not based upon how much gold we have in storage someplace. Money is not based upon how much grain is in my hut or how much extra food that I have. Deposit receipts are based on that. Money is now based on what? It's based on the total goods and services that a country produces. Well, here's an interesting point. Who produces goods and services? Workers. We do. The money is based upon our economic activity. Money is not based upon gold. Now, gold is still a value, but the U.S. dollar is not based upon gold. The U.S. dollar is based upon our workforce. Okay? And what happens to the dollar, the strength of the dollar, the strength of the economy if so many people are not working? The economy tanks. And this is a concern right now. And this is also why government is stepping into the economy by giving relief money to workers to keep the economy functioning. So what role does government play in the economy? Now that's something we're going to get in probably a little bit in the last lecture. Okay, so gross domestic product, and what I'm doing here is just giving you an introduction of where the economy comes from, and there's a whole lot of study on that in and of itself, but I think it's interesting to think about the economy this way. Okay, so then we get into post-industrial societies. We talk about debit card. We could talk about loans. So much of people's lifestyle, of people's social class position has got to do with things like credit card and loans, right? People, secure a loan to buy a house and they pay on it over time. People secure a loan to buy a car, right? Most people, and we're going to look at this, you can even go back to the chapter on social class, but most people don't have a lot of wealth, right? So most people are living basically paycheck to paycheck. Well, how do you advance your livelihood if you don't have enough cash on hand? Well, you have to borrow money. A lot of small businesses function by month-to-month loans. Okay? So again, just an introduction to some of these topics here. And to kind of sum up what we've just covered, let's look at how the economic transformations have changed different types of societies, right? So in the agricultural society, the invention of the plow led to new agricultural technology. Again, specialization in labor. Certain people do certain things, and you can see how our modern society, kind of extends back to this notion of productive specialization. Notice on number 3 there, it says permanent settlements. That's communities. The first communities as we know them now start to crop up. See what I did there? Agricultural revolution and crop up. I know you missed the humor. But communities as we live in them now, we didn't see those begin until around the agricultural revolution. That's how important extra food was, and not only for people's health and well-being, but for stabilizing human populations, right? Then we get into the industrial society, and so that is an incredible transformation of society. Now people are not working. Now keep in mind, in agricultural societies, everybody was working in agriculture. That's all that they did. Okay? And so then the invention of the steam engine, of industrialization. Folks, this is only about 300 years ago. Okay? Moves people off the farm. Some people are still farming. But now we've got people working in the industrial sector. They can harness energy and make new products and all this kind of stuff, right? Economic transformation of society. And then we get into the fourth revolution on the bottom of the page here, the post-industrial society. So now we have moved from making products in manufacturing plants and industrial plants, and we still do that. But now, there's an economy based around the information economy, the knowledge economy. So now it's not just how much food can you grow as a person. You have options, right? How much food can you grow, or how much labor can you provide in terms of industrial work, but how smart are you, right? And so what kind of jobs are associated with this? I mean, education, healthcare. What kind of jobs do you have to go to school for a long period of time? And they become office jobs, or they become what we call white-collar jobs. So notice lastly, it says from factories to almost anywhere. I'm working right now in the basement of my home. I didn't clock in anywhere, but I'm working, and I'm going to get paid for this. So what it means to engage in economic activity can vary depending upon the person, the social class, the education, the kind of work that they do. So hopefully you see how this kind of ties in stuff that we've already covered. The last thing that I want to point out to you is this agricultural society there. That's what we call primary economic activity. The industrial sector is what we're going to call secondary economic activity, and the post-industrial society is what we're going to call tertiary sector economic activity. So I'm going to stop right there and in this lecture.